What's up, guys? I want to talk a little bit about the next gen consoles. There's a lot of news about the next gen PS5, and also even what Microsoft's coming with the next gen Xbox consoles. And as I've talked about in the past, those of you who do watch my videos, you've heard me tell you guys that the next gen consoles are coming, and that I think that within the next year to 2 years, we're going to get the next gen consoles. So it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, there's a lot of good news when it comes to these consoles, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but it's going to be in layman terms because I'm not an expert on hardware and PC parts and stuff and how they work. I have a general idea of these things, but in terms of hardware, I just have a general feel about what's going on. So when you look at the PS5 and the things that are being confirmed from Sony themselves, they don't have a release date yet, right? So there are rumors that it could come out by Christmas next year, 2020, or even sooner. I don't really know about any of that. I'm just looking at it within 2 years. And then also Microsoft's working on their stuff. Now, the PS5, from everything that's been confirmed, is going to be pretty impressive in terms of power, performance, the type of things that people have been waiting for. Uh, Even though the PS4 has sold extremely well, I have always considered it, even from the outset, to be a little bit underpowered. I think that a lot of people, at at the end of the day, you buy the console because it's the best thing that's out there, but there's no other real options. But in terms of performance, I do think it's underwhelmed a lot of people. We're still struggling to get 4K, and I don't really think 4K is a necessity for every game, but there are games that do run in 4K with the Xbox One X, which is right now the most powerful console. And I do think there's a benchmark. And I think if you can meet, for some games, 4K 60 frames per second, I think that's, people would love that. I think that's pretty much what people would like to see. I think that would satisfy most people. Now, obviously, every game will not be able to meet that standard. But if you can run a game at 1440p, right? And at 60 frames, I think people would be very happy with that. And I do think that the good news is with the next gen that's coming, I don't think people are going to complain about lack of power or performance or the raw capability of what these consoles can do. I think the weak link in the chain will officially be the developer side of things. It's really up to their imagination. They'll be able to pretty much create any type of game they really want to create. They're not going to be able to point at PlayStation or Xbox and say, the hardware just isn't where we need it to be in order for us to do this or that. And that's great news for consumers because now it's really just up to developers. However, it's not really all great news because even with the current gen consoles, you could do a lot with them. And we've seen some really great examples of that. Just look at Red Dead Redemption 2. Not talking about online or the mess that is, but just the offline story mode game. It's one of the best games ever made, in my opinion. But just on a technical level, what they were able to achieve with that game in terms of graphics and content and everything that they, all the work they put into that game, it's just a gorgeous game to look at, to play, to experience. It's definitely something on another level that, and kudos to Rockstar for being able to do that. Again, I'm just talking about the offline, but the game is worth every penny just for offline alone. I stopped playing the online a while ago. I don't care about it anymore. It's just a big money making machine, and it's really Take Two's fault. You know, they care about is I mean they ruined the NBA 2K series. It's just all about microtransactions for them. That's another thing I've talked about. So I'm not going to go further with that. But in terms of what developers have been able to do, there are some great games like the one I just talked about, and other games as well that you can play and just like, wow, the game's pretty damn good. And you're not walking away feeling like, man, you know, it's too bad the developers couldn't do this or do that. And it's because the hardware really held them back. We're not really seeing a lot of that anymore. So with this next gen of consoles, the best part is, like I said, you're not going to have that. Like, that's not going to be the weak link in the chain. It's really all up to developers now. There's no more excuses. And, you know, so that's a great thing. But now that brings me to what I normally talk about, stuff like NASCAR games, the things that really interest me. And that, for me, the problem has really never been consoles when it comes to NASCAR game development. That's one series of games that I don't think anyone could ever say, oh, you know, it's the console's too weak. It's always been developers that have really either just not had high standards or just really didn't put their all into something. And the best game to this day on a console is still NASCAR Thunder 2004. So even if some people might prefer 2005 or 2003 for whatever reason, the point is those 3 years, that's still the pinnacle. That's an embarrassment really for any NASCAR game developer that you still haven't been able to eclipse that game. And we're going back several console generations. So the problems have always been on the developer side of things. These guys either rush these games out or just looking to make a quick buck and just rehashing, you know, the previous game and making small changes. And it's the type of thing we see with a lot of sports games in general. You see it with just about everything. You know, Madden football went down the toilet years ago. Same thing. And you know, like what I talked about, NBA 2K used to be an amazing game. And as the years have gone on, it's been more and more about microtransactions, and you see the quality drop. And that's what happens when you do yearly titles. I'm not a fan of yearly games. If I was a developer and I was making NASCAR games, I would not release a game every year. I just wouldn't do it. I would take my time and release the best possible product. I've talked about all my ideas, all that stuff. I would do my best to make that happen. And then you probably wouldn't see another game for another 2 or 3 years. But in the meantime, what I would do is just update the game yearly. So you would get a DLC pack that would update the rosters, the paint schemes, and improve the game where it needs, right? So whether it's physics, handling, AI, adding content, you know, things for presentation, making small changes to the framework of the game, that's what I would sell to people as a package, right? And if you want to get $25 for it, I think people would be happy with that, and you would keep a certain game up to date. Because if you want to, you really could do a lot with a single game and keep updating it and keeping it fresh on a yearly basis until you can push out another product that's redone from the ground up. So look at Grand Theft Auto 5. That game's been out for many years now, and a lot of people still play it because Rockstar has continued and continued to update it and add stuff to it, and so you can do a lot. And I think especially with sports games, you don't need a yearly title. That's the way I would do it, but unfortunately these guys have to try to maximize profit. And if all they're making are NASCAR games, this is all they have. So they're not going to do the business model I'm talking about, which would be better for consumers, but it's not in the best interest of the developer. That being said, here's a few things I'd like to see with these next-gen consoles. And I think definitely they're going to have to rebuild this game from the ground up. But they can't repeat the mistakes from the past. You can't have another NASCAR Heat Evolution where it's a bare bones product and then you're expecting people to support the game and then have this yearly wait and then just have these incremental changes every year. NASCAR game developers have really taken advantage of their fan base. It's a small fan base, and then you keep trickling down these improvements, but you never really step up and do something revolutionary. And all people are wanting is something that kind of matches 2004 Thunder, but of course at a modern day level. We deserve that. More than that, actually. And there's so much you can do with these games that I've talked about and other YouTubers have talked about. Lots of great ideas out there. And yet, here we are and we're still getting these little trickle-down improvements. And these developers, they continue to gamble that we're going to keep coming back every year. So this next-gen console is going to be a game changer, because if they do come out and develop another NASCAR Heat Evolution, which is a bare bones product with just absolute minimum of content, people are going to, I really think that's going to be the death knell of NASCAR games, at least until someone else comes along. So it's very important that whoever makes a NASCAR game for the next-gen console comes out the box with a fully fleshed out product. Speaking of fully fleshed out products, that is what I'm expecting with NASCAR Heat 4, or whatever they decide to call it. You know, we've given these guys a lot of leeway. And then I've been talking about NASCAR games for many years, and I've always had people with the same arguments of, oh, it's just their first game, it's just their second game, and it's just this, it's just that, and they're a small developer. I think it's safe to say we've reached the point where people really need to stop that. If you still think that it's acceptable that we get another NASCAR game and it's not a fully fleshed out product, where you're not walking away asking, where are all the stats? Where is this? Where is that? Why is there no paint booth? Why is there no presentation? Why is the, I'm not going to get into it. I talked about it enough, but a fully fleshed out NASCAR game. And that's what it means, that you're not really just walking away saying, why is this missing? Or why is that still missing? This is going to be the fourth game in the series. So 704 or whoever, Monster Games, whatever the fuck they call themselves, they're out of fucking excuses. So I really think you are going to lose a huge portion of your supporters if you continue to do this trickle-down bullshit. And you've told people since Evolution that was the first game, and that you were looking to do this, and that, and they've made improvements, and I've given them credit for that. So I think I've been more than fair to these guys, but they got to step their game up big time. And I'm expecting this next game to be fully fleshed out product. If it's not, I can't keep grading these guys on a curve. I was very generous to them with NASCAR Heat 3. And in fairness, it does do a lot of things pretty well. But it still doesn't do a lot of things that it should be doing, and there's still a lot of things missing. So 4 years is more than enough to ask people to continue to support these games, and you're still not delivering. So there's no room for excuses. I could care less. And this, the way they're steering things towards online and this esports garbage, I couldn't care less about this stuff. And it's very disturbing to me where this is all headed. So I'm waiting to see what this next game is. Uh, there are people saying that it's supposed to be really something awesome and whatever. It's all just talk at this point. So I'm expecting a lot. And with these next-gen consoles, I do expect these guys to step up their game eventually. Obviously, NASCAR Heat 4 or the next game is not a next-gen console game. So this is something separate. But as far as next-gen consoles go, I'm expecting these guys to start now doing things that are actually innovative. And by the way, we still don't have VR support for these games. Why is that? Every major racing game supports VR, just about. And racing games are not as intensive in terms of development as other games are. They are static environments. They're not open world environments. So those games, there's even less of an excuse. And every major racing game, Gran Turismo, all these games, Project Cars, they all have some form of VR support. And nothing lends itself more to VR than racing games. So why haven't these guys pushed for that? I would be one of the first people to buy a VR headset if a NASCAR game was VR compatible. So what are these guys waiting for? You got to start really pushing the envelope. And this next game, I really do think is kind of a do or die situation. You're not going to be able to get away with more incremental changes and still having people ask, why isn't there this or that? I think these guys are in trouble if they don't come out the box strong this year. So those are my thoughts. I think these next-gen consoles are great. I think that it's now all in the developers' hands. I know that PC guys are like, oh, PC's the greatest, and it's always going to be more powerful, and fine. That's all well and good. But the point is, I do think we've reached a point in video games where hardware is really not going to be a topic or an issue. Everyone is going to be capable, all right, or at least have the hardware to create great games. There's no more excuses. So you're not going to have this disparity where people are like, oh, this looks really awful here, but you should have got it on PC or this or that. And you know what? I've always been a PlayStation guy, and I'm really excited about the PS5. But I'm glad that Microsoft, I think they're going to come out really strong with whatever they're doing. And there's this back and forth right now. We're in the early stages of speculation, of course, but there's people saying that Microsoft's going to have the more powerful version of consoles when these next-gen consoles finally do come out. And to that I say, I'm not a fanboy. I'm not somebody who's going to get into arguments with people about PlayStation versus Xbox. I don't care. I think it's good that they're both going at it. This is good for everyone. I think both developers are going to come out with great consoles, and both Microsoft and Sony consumers are going to be happy. And developers in general, I don't think they're going to be like, I have a problem because this console is so much more powerful than this one, and what do we do? I think that both consoles are going to be very powerful, and these developers are going to be able to just push out some really cool games, and they're going to be able to meet at least, I think, 1440p, 60 frames, and it's good stuff. So I'm looking forward to that stuff. It's still early, but I don't know. I'm hoping we hear something about the next NASCAR game by June. If they really do have something substantial to offer, I do think we'll hear something sometime in June, maybe by the end of June. Definitely by the end of June, because it's really cutting it late. That's only a few months before September. or October, and I mean, I don't know. So let's see what happens. I look forward to your comments.